Picture this. It's the wild 1990s. Cell phones the size of bricks, cameras that still used film, banks stuffed with cash because electronic payments were only just beginning. Now imagine a group of masked strangers walking out of a city branch with duffel bags so heavy they can barely lift them, while the alarm stays silent. How did they do it? Was it genius planning, inside information, or just sheer nerve? Tonight, we're diving into a decade of breathtaking bank heists plots so bold they sound like movie scripts, yet every detail is real. From daylight robberies to underground tunnels and mysterious getaways, these stories will keep you guessing until the very last minute. The age of easy money imagines stepping back to the early 1990s. Neon lights flicker over buzzing streets, cassette tapes spin in car stereos, and everyone still pays in crisp paper bills. There are no instant phone alerts when cash leaves an account, no GPS trackers inside money bags. Banks look solid and serious, but inside, they're vulnerable in ways we can hardly imagine today. Now picture the moment a security guard locks the front doors at closing time. He hears the metallic click, feels that sense of routine safety, and yet a clever mind might already be setting a plan in motion. Behind ordinary evenings like this one, entire fortunes wait in dark vaults, protected mainly by habits and hope. Back then, banks were swimming in cash. Electronic transfers were still a novelty, so Friday afternoons meant stacks of currency ready for Monday business. Alarms relied on landlines that a simple wire cut could silence. Surveillance cameras recorded onto tapes that had to be changed and stored by hand. If someone forgot, the system kept rolling with a blank reel. For determined thieves, these gaps were pure gold. Urban life added another layer of opportunity. Delivery trucks moved millions each day without satellite tracking. Armored cars followed predictable routes and schedules. Some crews even timed their watches by the sound of nightly cash drops, like musicians following a beat. The technology of the time gave them cover. No quick-scan IDs, no instant police networks, and few digital footprints to trace. Economic conditions fueled the storm. Many countries were riding financial highs, mixed with sudden downturns. When stock markets trembled or factories closed, desperation and greed walked side by side. A few people looked at those vaults and thought, why not us? For some, it was a chance to erase debt. For others, the lure of easy millions was simply too tempting. The culture of the decade helped too. Movies and music celebrated rebellious freedom. From fast car chases on screen to songs about beating the system, daring adventures filled the public imagination. Real-world crews sometimes copied what they saw at the cinema, believing they could choreograph their own blockbuster ending. The line between fiction and fact blurred in smoky backrooms where plans took shape. Inside the banks, security was often a matter of trust, rather than advanced technology. Many relied on employees' loyalty and a few mechanical locks. Night guards worked long, lonely shifts, sometimes half asleep by dawn. In smaller branches, a single person might have all the keys, making insider knowledge priceless. A shared cup of coffee or a casual chat could reveal schedules, habits, and weak spots without anyone realizing. The police, meanwhile, faced their own challenges. Databases were slow, radios occasionally unreliable, and cooperation across regions often clumsy. A crew that struck in one city could vanish across a state or even a national border before investigators shared information. By the time notes compared and faxes arrived, the trail was already cold. This was the stage on which the boldest heists of the 90s unfolded. Every missing alarm wire, every unguarded back door, Every unencrypted phone call became a stepping stone for those ready to test the limits. Some thieves were seasoned professionals, others were ordinary people who saw a chance and took it. All of them operated in a world where old habits hadn't yet met modern defenses. As the decade progressed, each daring robbery pushed banks and law enforcement to react. Stronger vaults, better locks, and more advanced cameras slowly arrived, but often only after spectacular losses forced change. The balance between safety and risk shifted in slow motion, creating a narrow but perfect window for those bold enough to strike. That window of opportunity sets the scene for everything that follows. The next story takes us beneath the busiest city in America, where a patient crew decided the safest way to break into a bank was not through the door at all, but through the ground itself. The Manhattan Tunnel Job. The rumble of subway trains can feel like the heartbeat of New York. Day and night, steel wheels screech through tunnels that stretch for miles under the city. Most of us never wonder what else might be hiding down there. But in the mid-90s, a small crew of patient and brilliant criminals did more than wonder they went digging. It began with curiosity. One of the group had worked construction near Lower Manhattan and noticed an old maintenance shaft that connected to a forgotten service corridor. It looked like nothing more than a dusty dead end. Yet on the other side of that concrete wall sat a bank vault, heavy with weekend deposits. While thousands of commuters hurried above, these men quietly measured, sketched, and imagined a path that no alarm would ever sense. Their first challenge was secrecy. Bringing heavy tools into a busy city is no small feat, so they spread their work over months, carrying supplies in small loads disguised as everyday items. Buckets of soil left the site hidden inside trash bags. They timed their trips to match routine subway noise, so the scrape of shovels and hum of portable drills blended into the background. Neighbors heard nothing unusual, just the normal soundtrack of New York nights. Each evening, underground tested both nerve and stamina. The tunnel had to stay stable as they advanced inch by inch. They used wooden braces and improvised ventilation to keep air flowing. A single careless move could have brought the ceiling down. Yet according to later police reports, their workspace remained remarkably tidy. They even swept the approach to avoid suspicious footprints. Inside the bank above, life continued as usual. Employees prepared end-of-day paperwork and sealed cash bags, never suspecting that a silent excavation was underway directly below. Security focused on doors, windows, and the main vault entrance. Motion detectors rarely extended beneath the concrete floor, and that oversight proved critical. When the weekend of the big move arrived, the crew was ready. They waited until late Friday night, after the last subway maintenance run. One man stayed above ground, with a radio to monitor police chatter. The others descended, carrying specialized tools to pierce the final layer of reinforced floor. It took hours of careful chiseling and the nerve to remain calm when sparks briefly lit the cramped space. By dawn, they had slipped inside the vault. Working with surgical precision, they targeted only specific safety boxes and cash trays they knew held the greatest value. That selectivity kept the heist quick and minimized the mess. No alarms rang, no guards appeared. By the time the bank reopened Monday morning, the thieves and their haul were long gone. The aftermath left investigators stunned. There was no forced entry from the street, no broken locks, no sign of a typical break-in. Detectives had to follow the faint trail of disturbed earth through service corridors to discover the hidden tunnel. Newspapers marveled at the patience and planning, calling it a crime worthy of an engineer's blueprints. For weeks, the public speculated. How many people were involved? How did they dispose of tons of excavated soil? Some whispered about insider help, but no solid evidence ever emerged. The few clues, a dropped glove, a faint boot print, led nowhere. Whether the culprits fled the country or simply melted back into city life, they remained ghosts. This daring subterranean robbery did more than empty a vault. It forced banks to rethink security from the ground up, literally. Motion detectors and seismic sensors soon became standard in major cities. But in that brief window, before technology caught up, the tunnel job set a new benchmark for creativity and nerve. And while New York reeled from its underground mystery, a very different kind of lightning-fast operation was already taking shape across the Atlantic. In Sweden, another crew was perfecting the art of striking hard and disappearing in the blink of an eye. The Stockholm Morning Blitz. Stockholm in the early 90s woke up slowly. Long northern dawns painted the sky pale blue, while quiet streets filled with the smell of fresh bread and strong coffee. Most mornings began without urgency until one particular season, when a crew of masked strangers turned those peaceful hours into a countdown no one saw coming. The idea was brilliant in its simplicity. Instead of sneaking in at night or waiting for the chaos of business hours, the robbers targeted a razor-thin window just before opening. At that time, employees were inside preparing tills and counting cash, but doors were still locked to customers. For a few critical minutes, the bank was full of money and almost empty of protection. Months of preparation went into those few minutes. The crew studied delivery routes, shift changes, and even the habits of nearby cafes to predict traffic. They noted exactly how long it took each employee to reach the vault, which keys they used first, and when the alarm system was briefly disabled for internal checks. They practiced until their plan fit inside a perfect 2-minute routine. When the chosen morning arrived, Stockholm was wrapped in quiet mist. The team approached on bicycles and small cars that blended with early commuters. Dressed as everyday workers beneath loose jackets, they aroused no suspicion. One stood watch outside, disguised as a street sweeper, ready to signal with a simple tilt of his broom. Inside, a clerk unlocked the first door. The crew slipped in with swift precision. No shouting, no wild gestures, just calm, clear instructions. They collected cash that had been counted but not yet sealed, focusing only on high-value notes. Another member monitored the hallway to ensure no customer arrived early. The entire action lasted less than the time it takes to brew a pot of coffee. When the staff finally triggered an alarm, the thieves were already blocks away, splitting into side streets and vanishing into the morning crowd. Their escape was so smooth that witnesses disagreed on how many people were even involved. Police arrived to confusion. Surveillance cameras, running on analog tapes, captured little more than blurred outlines. Roadblocks set minutes later found nothing. By the time authorities pieced together the pattern of bicycles, side streets, and false clothing layers, the trail had cooled. The heists didn't stop at one. Encouraged by success, the crew repeated the strategy in different districts, each time refining their schedule. They left behind only whispers and a growing sense of unease. Newspapers called it a morning phantom, and some commuters began arriving later to avoid the chill of sudden panic. Eventually, one tiny oversight unraveled their streak. A dropped receipt from a fuel purchase led detectives to a rental car linked to a known petty thief. Surveillance of that suspect revealed connections to the rest of the team. Step by step, the quiet efficiency that had defined their crimes became the very thread investigators needed. Even after arrests, fascination lingered. Many admired the almost clockwork discipline. No weapons fired, no injuries, and an operation that depended more on timing than brute force. The case became a textbook example of how patience and planning can rival even the most advanced alarms of the time. From Sweden's cool precision, our journey now shifts east, where the chaos of post-Soviet Moscow created opportunities of a completely different scale, where a heist could begin, not with silence, but with a perfect imitation of law and order itself. Moscow's Phantom Car Heist. Moscow, in the early 1990s, was a city in restless motion. The Soviet Union had dissolved, and a new economy was being born almost overnight. Banks multiplied, cash flowed fast, and armored vehicles moved ruble-packed bags through streets that still carried the echo of old rules. Amid that turbulence, one daring crew found a way to turn everyday banking routines into the perfect disguise. It started with observation. The group noticed how armored cars arrived at specific branches on predictable days. Drivers followed almost the same route every week, and the guards, though well-armed, relied on paperwork more than suspicion. With so many new businesses and constant deliveries, nobody questioned an extra van on the street. The idea that grew was audacious. Build a convincing duplicate of an armored cash transport vehicle, right down to the company logo and worn license plates. One member, a skilled mechanic, sourced an old delivery truck and transformed it with careful welding and a coat of matching paint. They even obtained uniforms that mirrored those of the real security service. At a glance, their vehicle was the twin of the genuine article. Next came the art of forged documents. In those years, many official stamps and forms could be duplicated with simple tools. The crew obtained blank delivery sheets, then reproduced the ink patterns and signatures of bank officials. A friendly contact in a small print shop helped create carbon copy manifests. Each detail added weight to the illusion. The heist itself unfolded on a chilly weekday morning. While the legitimate armored truck was delayed by unexpected traffic, the imposter van rolled up exactly on time. The fake guards stepped out with quiet confidence, greeting bank employees by name thanks to careful surveillance of previous runs. They presented flawless paperwork. Without hesitation, staff handed over several bags of currency destined for central processing. Witnesses later recalled nothing alarming. The team spoke politely, even shared a brief joke about the cold weather. In less than 10 minutes, they were gone, blending into Moscow's morning rush. No alarms, no confrontation, just a routine pickup that never reached its destination. The real armored car arrived shortly after, its crew surprised to hear that the cash had already been collected. Confusion turned to panic. Phones rang across departments as the shocking realization spread. The money had vanished in plain sight. Investigators retraced every step, but the imposter van seemed to have dissolved into the city's vast network of roads. For weeks, the search dragged on. Tips came from every direction, most of them useless. Some speculated about insider cooperation, others about a connection to organized crime. Yet no clear trail emerged. The forged documents were so precise that even handwriting experts struggled to find flaws. The public was captivated. Newspapers nicknamed the criminals the Phantom Car Gang, and talk shows debated their fate. Had they fled abroad with their winnings? Were they hiding in plain sight, living ordinary lives on quiet streets? The mystery only deepened when a few scattered banknotes with sequential numbers surfaced in distant markets, hinting at a slow and careful laundering process. Eventually, a minor clue broke the silence. A mechanic recognized the unique welding pattern on a piece of scrap metal from a dismantled vehicle. That lead pointed to a remote garage outside the city, where investigators found fragments of paint and fabric matching the counterfeit uniforms. Yet by then, the key players had disappeared. Whether they left the country or simply changed identities, their final whereabouts remain unknown. This seamless impersonation did more than drain millions. It forced banks to reconsider everything from delivery schedules to the authenticity of uniforms and paperwork. The idea that anyone could simply show up, look official, and drive away with a fortune left a lasting mark on Russian banking security. While Moscow's mystery proved that perfect imitation could outwit even the watchful eye, across the English Channel, a different drama was unfolding. There, a crew relied not on look-alike vehicles, but on human psychology itself, turning an ordinary maintenance visit into one of Britain's most astonishing disappearances. The London Disappearing Act. London in the mid-90s bustled with morning commuters and the steady rhythm of financial life. Among the grand stone facades and quiet side streets, bank branches opened like clockwork, welcoming a stream of customers and cash deliveries. Into this everyday calm stepped a team who would carry out one of the most elegant and puzzling heists of the decade. It began with a phone call that seemed routine. A man claiming to represent a trusted electrical maintenance firm scheduled a visit to inspect a vault's power supply. Such checks were common, and the caller provided every required detail: employee ID, work order number, and even the signature of a bank manager, carefully forged, of course. With those formalities in place, the visit raised no alarm. Weeks of groundwork supported that single call. The crew had studied the bank's habits, mapping guard rotations and maintenance schedules. They even tracked when cleaning services arrived, so their presence would blend into the usual flow of uniforms and toolboxes. The plan depended on a simple truth. People rarely question a worker in a fluorescent vest holding a clipboard. On a damp weekday evening, two men in matching overalls arrived at the bank's side entrance. They carried toolkits filled not with wires and pliers, but with tiny hidden cameras and signal jammers. Calm and courteous, they explained they needed to inspect the vault's auxiliary circuits. Staff guided them downstairs, where the quiet hum of machinery masked the faint clicks of their concealed devices. The hidden cameras were their silent allies. Installed in air vents and ceiling panels, they captured every turn of a key, every combination dialed. Over several nights, the team returned under the same pretext, collecting footage and noting exactly when the vault was left in standby mode for routine maintenance. They also slipped a small signal disruptor into an innocuous power box, ready to block alarms at the critical moment. When the chosen night arrived, the real magic began. Using the captured codes and timing data, the team re-entered the bank after closing, again posing as late-shift electricians. The guard on duty, accustomed to their visits, offered a friendly nod and went back to his paperwork. Within minutes, the crew had neutralized the alarm circuit and accessed the vault. No drilling, no loud tools, just a series of precise, well-practiced steps. Inside the vault, they worked with clinical efficiency, selecting cash bundles and valuables already sorted for early morning transfers. Their restraint was striking. No broken locks, no unnecessary mess. By the time the first cleaning crew arrived, the electricians were gone, leaving behind only the faint scent of machine oil and a flawless-looking power box. The next morning, chaos met confusion. Staff discovered that an immense sum had vanished, yet every door and lock appeared intact. Security tapes showed nothing unusual, just the expected presence of maintenance workers performing checks. Even when investigators examined the wiring, they struggled to understand how alarms had remained silent. Speculation spread quickly. Some suspected inside cooperation. Others imagined cutting-edge technology. Newspapers nicknamed the event the Disappearing Act, and television reports marveled at the calm audacity of thieves who seemed to vanish like stage magicians. Eventually, a subtle clue emerged. A supplier noticed that the company name on the work order matched no real business, despite the perfect-looking stationery. That discovery opened a slow path toward identifying forged documents and a handful of suspects. Yet most of the stolen wealth remained unrecovered, and key players never faced trial. To this day, parts of the operation remain a mystery. The London Disappearing Act proved that in an age before widespread digital verification, human trust could be as exploitable as any weak lock. Banks soon tightened rules for contractor access and introduced stricter ID checks. But for that brief moment, a polite smile and a convincing clipboard were enough to make millions evaporate. As we leave London's misty streets, our journey heads westward, where another group of innovators fused old-school safe-cracking with the newborn world of computer networks, ushering in the first great marriage of physical daring and digital trickery. High-tech hustle in Los Angeles. They called it the perfect hybrid, old-school burglars with a new kind of brain. Imagine a team that can pick a mechanical lock with one hand while, with the other, they quietly disable an alarm signal from a battered laptop. In Los Angeles, during the 1990s, that blend of metal and code changed the rules of the game. The city was already a patchwork of extremes, glitz and grit side by side, flashing billboards and quiet alleyways. That environment suited a certain type of criminal. Part locksmith, part tinkerer, part hacker. These were people who had grown up around car radios and game consoles, who could solder a circuit and also read a wiring diagram. When banks still relied on analog alarm panels and telephone lines, a clever person with a screwdriver and a modem could do serious damage. Their planning looked like a tech startup's pitch meeting. They picked targets by studying blueprints, then layered in digital reconnaissance. Someone would place an anonymous call or a casual question in a public forum to learn when maintenance checks happened. Another member would visit under a harmless pretext, returning a faulty ATM receipt, asking for directions, and quietly note the make and model of the alarm box in the back room. It sounds small, but those tiny observations added up. What made the LA crews different was how they combined two worlds. One night, they might approach a suburban branch, like a traditional roboscoping escape routes, watching guard patterns. The next day, they sat in a diner and fished an employee with a fake email, coaxing out login details or a scheduling memo. They used social engineering the way others used a crowbar, gently, patiently, and with an eye for what people would willingly give away. On the technical side, their tools were nothing like Hollywood glam. They worked with cheap laptop computers, borrowed modems, and simple radio jammers, but they used those tools cleverly. In several cases, a team member would set up near the bank with a portable radio that could mimic the signal an alarm panel sent to the central monitoring station. By replaying or jamming that signal at exactly the right time, they created the illusion that everything was normal, even while someone walked straight into a vault. One of the most audacious tricks involved ATMs. These machines were still early in their networked life, sometimes batch processing overnight and often relying on insecure lines. The gang learned to send false authorization messages or to manipulate the transaction logs so that withdrawals appeared to be legitimate. In other instances, they would physically open an ATM with practiced hands, extract cash cassettes, and then replay old data to cover their footprints. It was a mix of manual dexterity and basic programming that left investigators baffled. What also distinguished these robberies was timing. The teams coordinated physical entry with a digital screen of smoke and mirrors. While a pair of thieves was inside a branch, another member sat several blocks away, connected to a dial-up line and watching the bank's phone handshake. If a report started to route to the monitoring company, the hacker could intercept or delay it. If a guard tried to call the police, the crook could flood the line with noise or reroute it through a less responsive switchboard. The goal was always the same: buy a few extra minutes and make those minutes count. Despite the cleverness, hubris sometimes played a role. Technology can be brittle when improvisation is involved. In one notorious Los Angeles attempt, the team jammed the alarm but failed to account for a backup cellular unit. Moments after they left with the loot, a silent alert crawled down a parallel path and reached a dispatcher. The responding officers intercepted the suspects on a side street. It was a reminder that complexity often introduces new failure points. Still, many of these heists succeeded long enough to change policy. Banks began to test redundancy, install tamper-evident seals on communications boxes, and demand authentication tokens rather than simple passwords. Monitoring companies updated procedures, and law enforcement developed units that understood both locks and log files. Those changes would blunt the technique, but not before the hybrid thieves made their mark. There was one more lesson from Los Angeles that mattered beyond the stolen cash. The decade had shown that crime was evolving with technology. The innovations of greedy minds would force defenders to innovate too. In a way, those robberies were a first act in a drama that would play out in many forms: the birth of cybercrime as a serious counterpart to physical theft. As investigators chased digital breadcrumbs in California, halfway around the world, another type of disguise was unfolding, where celebration itself became cover. In Brazil, during the annual carnival, a crew used music, masks, and chaos to hide a carefully dug tunnel into a bank. Rio's carnival cover-up picture Rio de Janeiro on a warm February night in the 1990s. The streets tremble with drumbeats, dancers swirl in glittering costumes, and fireworks burst above the ocean. During carnival, noise never sleeps, and colors blur until sunrise. Amid this celebration, a quiet team of diggers turned the city's greatest festival into the ultimate camouflage for a daring bank heist. The plan began months earlier, in a modest rented house only a few blocks from their chosen bank. Officially, it was a small clothing workshop, complete with sewing machines and bolts of fabric. Neighbors sometimes heard late-night activity and assumed new costumes were being stitched for the parade. In truth, behind a hidden door, workers with helmets and pickaxes were tunneling steadily toward the bank's underground vault. Every detail leaned on Carnival's natural distractions. Deliveries of construction materials arrived alongside costume fabrics and party decorations. The clatter of drills and the rumble of soil carts blended perfectly with the constant music and firecracker bursts that filled the city throughout the weeks of preparation. Even the smell of damp earth mingled with the scent of food stalls and bonfires, hiding what might otherwise have raised suspicion. The tunnel itself was a feat of patience and skill. Nearly 80 meters long, it descended beneath streets, crossed under water pipes, and rose precisely beneath the target vault. The diggers reinforced walls with wood and concrete, installed electric lighting, and even set up a ventilation system using fans and flexible ducts. They worked in shifts, always stopping when city workers came near, always logging the distance with meticulous care. As Carnival approached, excitement in Rio masked every irregular movement. Millions of people crowded the avenues, and the steady thud of samba drums became a constant shield. The crew timed their final push to coincide with the festival's loudest weekend. While the city danced, they broke through the final layer of concrete and entered the vault with hardly a whisper. Inside, mountains of cash awaited. Banks often held extra reserves during Carnival, knowing that commerce and tourism spiked sharply. The thieves methodically loaded notes into waterproof sacks and slid them back through the tunnel to waiting vans. Their work stretched over hours, yet above ground, no one noticed anything beyond the ongoing revelry. It was as if the earth itself had joined the party. By the time Monday morning arrived and bank employees unlocked the doors, the tunnelers were gone. What they left behind was both simple and astonishing. A perfectly carved passage with electric lights still burning and the faint echo of samba music drifting down from the surface. Authorities estimated the loss at many millions of dollars, one of the largest thefts in Brazil's history. The aftermath turned into a nationwide puzzle. Investigators traced rental contracts, examined soil samples, and questioned hundreds of Carnival workers. Gradually, they discovered how the crew had leased the house, hired fake garment workers, and used festival noise as a natural cover for months. Yet many of the stolen funds never surfaced, and several key members vanished as if swallowed by the celebration itself. For ordinary citizens, the story became part of Carnival folklore. Newspapers called it the heist that danced, and street performers even wove references into their songs. Beyond the spectacle, however, banks were forced to reconsider their assumptions. They realized that noise and crowds could hide not just pickpockets, but entire subterranean operations. The Rio tunnel job marked a turning point, proof that perfect timing and the energy of a citywide festival could substitute for weapons or speed. It showed how a patient plan could outwit alarms and guards, provided the environment itself became an ally. And just as Brazil learned that lesson, another drama of trust and betrayal was unfolding far to the north. In the American Midwest, not noise but quiet confidence inside a bank branch would give a different group of thieves the key advantage they needed. The Chicago inside man. Mystery Chicago in the mid-90s thrived on routine. Banks opened promptly at 9. Armored trucks arrived with the reliability of clockwork, and regular customers greeted tellers by name. In that everyday rhythm, trust was everything. Employees depended on each other, and managers often thought of their staff as family. Into that circle of confidence stepped someone who quietly planned to betray it. It began with small observations invisible to outsiders. An experienced bank employee noticed which cameras were occasionally out of focus when the alarm system underwent maintenance, and how often night guards made their rounds. None of this looked suspicious, just ordinary knowledge gained over years of steady work. But to a mind bent on theft, these details formed the outline of opportunity. The idea that emerged was bold, but subtle. Rather than force a door or break a lock, the insider would simply open the vault at the right moment and let trusted accomplices in. That required precise timing and careful misdirection. For months, This person adjusted schedules, swapped shifts, and suggested harmless changes that created tiny blind spots in the bank's routine. Outside, helpers were equally disciplined. They never approached the branch before the chosen night. Instead, they met in quiet diners and recorded every instruction. They learned how to move silently, where to park a getaway car that would escape street cameras, and how to carry cash in a way that avoided obvious bulges. Each rehearsal reinforced one goal: be in and out before anyone even guessed a crime was happening. The heist unfolded on a chilly spring evening. After closing time, the insider lingered under the pretext of finishing paperwork. When the building finally emptied, a simple coded message went out, one ring on a pager, followed by a brief pause. Within minutes, two masked partners slipped through a side door that had been left unlatched exactly as planned. Inside, there was no need for violence or even raised voices. The insider had already disabled specific alarm zones and recorded the vault combination under the guise of a routine safety check. The trio moved with calm precision, selecting bundled currency that would be hardest to trace. They left decorative coins and heavy change, focusing only on high-value, unmarked notes. By midnight, they were gone. The insider reset alarms and relocked doors, leaving everything seemingly untouched. When morning arrived, employees found nothing unusual until the cash count revealed a staggering shortfall. Confusion turned quickly to disbelief. How could so much money disappear when every entrance remained secure? Detectives faced a puzzle. There were no broken windows, no forced locks, and no alarm records of unauthorized access. At first, investigators suspected a sophisticated external hacker had disabled cameras and alarms. But then small inconsistencies emerged: a key that had been logged in twice, a maintenance check entered at an odd hour, and a faint fingerprint on a door that should have required gloves. Gradually, suspicion turned inward. Questioning staff proved difficult. Long-standing friendships clouded judgment, and many refused to believe a colleague could betray them. Yet evidence accumulated. Security logs showed a pattern of late-night overtime requests by one particular employee. Cross-referencing pager records finally revealed messages sent in the crucial window of the crime. When confronted, the insider tried to maintain innocence, but discrepancies piled up. Bank policies at the time made prosecution tricky, and several accomplices vanished before warrants were issued. Still, the case sent shockwaves through the industry. It demonstrated that trust, the very foundation of banking, could also be its greatest weakness. The story left lasting lessons. Banks introduced tighter dual control procedures, requiring two independent employees to open vaults. Random audits and background checks became standard. Technology would later add biometric access and digital logs, but the memory of that silent betrayal stayed strong. From Chicago's quiet treachery, our journey heads south and west, where criminals chose the opposite path. Instead of stealth or insider help, a Texas duo decided to revive the spirit of old frontier legends, striking banks in broad daylight with dramatic flair and a taste for theatrical risk. Wild West Revival in Texas, in the 1990s, loved its legends of outlaws and open roads. From dusty small towns to booming suburbs, stories of frontier daring still echoed in saloons and roadside diners. Into that backdrop rode a pair of modern-day bandits who decided to turn myth into reality, storming banks in daylight and tipping their hats to a bygone era of stagecoach stick-ups. The partnership began, fittingly, with a chance meeting at a rodeo. Both men had checkered pasts and a taste for fast cars and quicker thrills. Over long nights in roadside bars, they traded stories of old Western robberies and complained that modern thieves lacked style. Gradually, a plan took shape. They would rob banks, not in secret, but in full view, reviving the brazen swagger of the Wild West. Preparation mattered as much as bravado. The duo studied small-town banks along highways, looking for locations where police response times were slowed by distance. They mapped every back road and farm track, often driving the routes at dawn to test how long it took to disappear into open countryside. They learned which branches received cash shipments on specific days, ensuring maximum payoff for each strike. On their chosen mornings, they dressed the part. Cowboy hats, denim jackets, and boots became their calling card. Rather than hide their faces completely, they wore simple scarves that could be pulled down if they wanted to blend in after the fact. Their weapons of choice were mostly for show unloaded or even wooden replicas because their real plan depended on speed and confusion, not force. A typical heist unfolded with cinematic timing. They would park an inconspicuous pickup truck nearby, saunter through the front doors just after opening, and greet staff with a casual drawl. One man would calmly ask everyone to step aside, while the other collected ready cash from teller drawers and delivery bags. Their movements were so rehearsed that they rarely stayed longer than 3 minutes. As soon as they left, the chase began. But rather than head for big highways, they veered onto farm roads and private ranch trails, switching vehicles at hidden spots arranged in advance. By the time local patrols received full descriptions, the robbers were often miles away, melting into the patchwork of rural Texas. The pair added showmanship to every escape. Anonymous letters sometimes arrived at local newspapers, taunting authorities and promising one more ride before sunset. Radio stations buzzed with theories. Some callers even cheered the outlaws, comparing them to folk heroes of the Old West. That public fascination both thrilled and endangered the duo, since attention meant more pressure from law enforcement. Investigators built profiles with care. They studied the letters' handwriting, traced unusual fuel purchases along remote roads, and even consulted historians about references to old Western folklore. Gradually, a clearer picture emerged. Surveillance photos captured a distinctive belt buckle worn at multiple scenes, and a pawn shop receipt finally connected that buckle to one suspect. The arrest, when it came, lacked the drama of their robberies. Acting on a tip, state troopers found them at a quiet cabin, their famous hats hanging on a wall. In interviews, the two expressed no regret, saying they had wanted to bring back excitement. Their words revealed the paradox at the heart of their spree, a craving for recognition that ultimately betrayed them. The Wild West revival changed how rural banks approached security. Branches introduced staggered cash deliveries and remote alarm triggers that alerted state police directly. Yet for many Texans, the memory of those daylight raids lived on as both warning and legend proof that romance and risk can still walk hand in hand. As Texas returned to calm, Hollywood took notice. The stories of masked riders, hidden tunnels, and phantom cars were too rich to ignore. Filmmakers and TV writers soon began weaving these real heists into scripts, carrying their echoes far beyond the crime scenes themselves, from heists to Hollywood. By the late 1990s, the world's boldest bank robberies had already captured imaginations far beyond the crime pages. News anchors recounted every detail, magazines published elaborate diagrams, and talk shows debated motives. For many moviegoers, These real events felt more gripping than fiction, and Hollywood agreed. Soon, the same creativity that fueled the crimes began shaping scripts, sets, and silver screen legends. It often started with a single striking image: a phantom armored car rolling away from a Moscow branch, a hidden shaft beneath New York's busy streets, a Rio tunnel glowing with electric lights while carnival drums pounded overhead. These visuals were tailor-made for the camera. Producers and screenwriters clipped newspaper articles and highlighted key phrases, imagining how an audience would gasp at each twist. Studios across Los Angeles saw opportunity. Crime thrillers were already popular, but authentic detail was gold. Some writers arranged quiet meetings with detectives or retired bank security experts to learn how alarms worked, how cash deliveries were scheduled, and how the thieves might improvise. Others sifted through court transcripts, borrowing dialogue almost word for word. The goal was simple: make fiction feel as real as the headlines. One striking example involved a film about an intricate downtown heist that echoed the Manhattan Tunnel job. Viewers watched crews time their movements with subway schedules and silence alarms through engineering know-how scenes lifted almost entirely from police reports. Another blockbuster borrowed from the Los Angeles high-tech crew, portraying thieves who jammed signals and hacked networks long before the term cybercrime became common. Television joined in with episodic crime dramas. Writers adapted the Stockholm Morning Blitz into a tense, clock-ticking sequence, focusing on how minutes, sometimes seconds, decide success or failure. Meanwhile, docudrama series recreated the Chicago Insider betrayal, blending dramatized interviews with authentic investigative notes. Audiences found themselves asking whether they were watching entertainment or history. The influence cut both ways. Detectives reported that some later robberies seemed inspired by films that were, in turn, inspired by earlier crimes. A loop emerged. Reality fed fiction. Fiction encouraged new schemes, and each cycle added fresh material for the screen. Law enforcement had to adapt by studying not only criminal patterns, but also the cultural echoes that could spark copycats. Beyond pure thrillers, filmmakers explored deeper themes. Some scripts portrayed thieves as anti-heroes, questioning the boundary between ambition and desperation. Others highlighted the detective's side, showing patient investigation as a drama of its own. In either case, the core attraction remained the same. True heists already contained suspense, clever planning, and surprising reversals that no writer needed to invent. Sound design played its part. Directors used the clatter of subway tracks, the distant samba of carnival, and the hollow echo of empty vaults to immerse audiences. Cinematographers experimented with shadows and shifting lights to mimic the tension of an actual stakeout. Even costume designers found inspiration, from the cowboy hats of the Texas duo to the precise uniforms of Moscow's imposters. As these stories spread, public fascination deepened. Viewers debated motives on early internet forums and swapped theories about which unsolved cases might still hide secret treasure. The line between entertainment and investigation blurred. In some instances, new tips surfaced only after a movie reminded someone of a forgotten clue. The long-term effect was unmistakable. Banks upgraded not just alarms and vaults, but also their understanding of psychology, recognizing how popular culture can shape criminal ambition. Screenwriters, in turn, became more careful about how much technical detail they revealed, balancing drama with social responsibility. By the dawn of the 2000s, the great heists of the 1990s had found a permanent second life on screens big and small. What began as daring crimes ended as modern folklore, retold again and again with every new adaptation. And yet the fascination doesn't end with movie credits. The next step in our journey looks back at the decade as a whole, weighing what these stories reveal about risk, innovation, and the endless duel between those who guard wealth and those determined to take it. Lessons and legends. As the 1990s drew to a close, banks, police, and ordinary citizens looked back on a decade that often felt stranger than fiction. It was an era when criminals with patience and nerve turned routine deliveries, festival music, or even a simple pager into the keys to entire fortunes. What remained after the headlines faded was more than a list of robberies. It was a set of lessons about technology, trust, and the endless creativity of the human mind. Consider how quickly the rules kept changing. Early in the decade, a hidden tunnel beneath Manhattan could still surprise seasoned detectives. By the mid-90s, Moscow's Phantom car showed that perfect paperwork might open more doors than a crowbar. Soon after, Los Angeles crews blended laptop tricks with classic safe cracking, proving that the next frontier was digital as much as physical. Each heist forced the defenders to adapt, pushing banks to install seismic sensors, duplicate communication lines, and encrypted alarm signals. But the most striking insight may be psychological. Many of these crimes succeeded not because locks were weak, but because habits were predictable. Guards trusted familiar uniforms. Managers relied on schedules that repeated week after week. A polite smile, a forged letterhead, or a perfectly timed distraction could lower defenses better than any weapon. In that sense, the 90s revealed how human confidence itself can be both a strength and a weakness. The public reaction shaped the story too. Newspapers treated some robbers almost like folk heroes, especially when no one was hurt and the plans seemed impossibly clever. Movies and television amplified that fascination, turning real police reports into blockbuster plots. As audiences cheered or gasped, criminals saw their exploits transformed into modern myths. That feedback loop, where reality feeds fiction and fiction inspires reality, still echoes in today's thrillers and heist dramas. Law enforcement agencies, meanwhile, learned to cooperate in new ways. International alerts became faster, databases more connected, and forensic science more precise. By the end of the decade, a thief who crossed a border could no longer count on weeks of confusion before pursuit began. Lessons from Chicago's insider betrayal and Stockholm's split-second raids were built into training manuals and shared across continents. For the banking world, the legacy was equally lasting. Branches introduced dual-control vault systems, random cash delivery times, and stricter contractor checks. Digital surveillance moved from grainy videotape to real-time feeds stored off-site. Cybersecurity budgets grew, recognizing that a clever keystroke could now equal a crowbar. Each reform was, in some way, a quiet tribute to the ingenuity of those who had exploited earlier gaps. And yet, for all the technical progress, the fascination endures. People remain drawn to stories of risk, nerve, and audacity. Perhaps it is the reminder that even in a world of rules and routines, there will always be individuals willing to rewrite the script, sometimes with nothing more than patience and imagination. Looking back, the great bank heists of the 1990s form a single sweeping tale, a contest of wits where every success pushed the next defense a little higher. From tunnels and phantom cars to carnival distractions and digital smoke screens, each chapter showed a different way that ambition meets opportunity. Together, they mark a turning point, when traditional crime crossed into the modern era, and left a permanent mark on culture. As our journey through these remarkable stories closes, one thing stands clear. History's boldest heists are more than crimes. They are enduring legends, teaching us how quickly technology, trust, and human daring can reshape the world, lessons that still matter every time a vault door swings shut and someone asks, is it truly secure?